All right. So what I was trying to draw and show you guys, but we will do the best that we can with it, is the abdominal quadrants in the abdominal cavity. So understand that in order to help identify organs and to kind of get an idea of which organs are where, we divide the abdomen into 4 areas. It's very important that you guys know which organs are in which quadrants. And later on, it's going to be very significant that you know which organs are in which quadrants. Okay? So first off, the center point is the belly button, the umbilicus. So right in there is the belly button. Okay. From there, just like in the 4 corners part of the US where you have the 4 states coming together, same thing there. The umbilicus, think about the 4 corners area, because we'll have the quadrants. And again, I wish I had my iPad to do this, but what side, as we're looking at this, what side is this side right in? What's this side right here?
Right.
Okay. And then the other side?
Left.
The left.
Left. Now, so then here's a transverse line right in there. So normally this would be superior and inferior, right? But we don't do that in this case. So what would the area above the belly button be called?
Upper torso.
Okay, upper, and then below?
Lower.
And what are these 4 things called?
The what?
Quadrants. Yeah. So you'll see here, right upper quadrant, right lower quadrant, left upper quadrant, left lower quadrant. So we abbreviate them. See, this is why I want my iPad. RUQ. Actually, drive me nuts. So RUQ, and then no, wrong one. RLQ, and then LUQ, and LLQ. So those are your abbreviations. Now, organs. So on the right side, we start off with the liver. So the liver is primarily a right upper quadrant organ. However, as you see, some of it does go into the left upper quadrant, but that's okay. We're still concerned about the right upper quadrant. The thing about the liver, and I don't know what all that junk is. Thing about the liver is it's very vascular, so it can bleed a lot. Underneath the liver, we also have the gallbladder. Now I'll just kind of put it in there. Now, before I forget, let me use a different color to show you. I mean, so as we go down, we get the stomach, and that is primarily a left upper quadrant organ. Yeah, a little bit does go into the right, but when we think about the stomach, we think about it being a left upper quadrant organ. From there, from the abdomen, I'm sorry, from the stomach, all this right here, you see all that? That's the small intestine. At the end of the small intestine, then we get first off, we have the appendix, a little bitty thing right there. And then we have the colon that goes up, over, down, and then into the sigmoid colon, and finally to the rectum. And then the anus. All right. Underneath the stomach, we also have the spleen. The spleen is also a very vascular organ. All right, and then we have the pancreas. The pancreas really starts in the right upper quadrant, but a lot of it, let me do a darker color here, starts here, but most of it is located in the left upper quadrant. Now, the only other thing, and we're not going to worry about the fallopian tubes or the ovaries, but the only other thing here that we didn't talk about that's listed here is the kidneys. And that's because really the kidneys aren't really abdominal organs per se, in that they're not found in the abdomen, they're found in the retroperitoneal area. In other words, in your back, towards your back. Retro, behind, peritoneal, the peritonitis, or the peritoneal, the abdomen. Okay, so those are your abdominal organs. Please study those. Know which organs are in which quadrants. And again, the fallopian tubes, the ovaries, you don't have to worry about those. Same thing with the ureters. I mean, we'll talk about what the ureters are. You know, we have the bladder kind of in the center, but that's lower abdomen. The uterus, I'm sorry. Well, yeah, the uterus, the bladder. We're more concerned about those with pregnant women, especially the uterus. But we're more concerned about the liver, the gallbladder, the spleen, the stomach, the pancreas, and knowing the intestines. And the intestines are in all four quadrants. Okay. Questions?
Can you explain why the colon is in all four quadrants?
Because it starts off at the end of the small intestine. And so now it has to, as the food is processed through the intestines, now it has to go out. And we know this because at least once a day we go to the bathroom and go number two. So it's all all that is waste. The body didn't need anymore. It just kind of clumped it up. It created, I forget the name of it, unprocessed, but it eventually hardens up and becomes stool. And so we have to get rid of that. And so instead of just coming out of the small intestine, it goes into the large intestine where it finishes absorbing water. And so it goes up. We call that the ascending colon because it's going up, and then it has to go across. It's kind of trying to go around some organs. So the transverse colon, then it goes down to the descending colon, and then the sigmoid colon, which is the loop. So the loop is the descending colon, and then it loops, that's the sigmoid colon, and then the rectum, and finally it goes through the anus and out into the water. In other words, the toilet. So it needed a little bit more of the rationale why, I don't know, evolution or God, take your pick. I know which one I pick, but All right. So any questions on that so far? All right. So I want your guys' involvement. All right. So guys, you see this good looking girl and she says, if you catch me, I'm yours. So what are you going to do? Now, forget if you're married or girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever. Or actually, let's not even say you're chasing this girl. Let's be all inclusive. You're chasing this person that says, if you can catch me, you can have me. And again, forget if you're married, if you got a girlfriend, boyfriend, Sancho, all the above. Let's just pretend it's that person or somebody else. All right. So other than saying, oh, hell yeah, what are you going to start doing?
Running.
You're going to start running after them, right? Okay. So how do you run?
With your legs.
Okay. And so what's happening in your legs?
They're moving, using forward motion.
All right. So they go one after in front of the other. Now, what's responsible for moving those legs one leg at a time?
Your motor functions, your muscles.
All right. So you got your muscles. What else?
Your brain is telling you to, hey,
Okay,
legs work.
But we're not going to think about the brain right now. We're just thinking about
Ligaments,
the musculoskeletal system. Hint, hint, hint. Uh-huh.
ligaments, tendons,
There you go. So where do your bones come in?
Support. So it keeps you up to keep you running.
Okay, it's for support. So guess what? So what are the functions of the musculoskeletal system? In other words, the muscles and the bones.
move and support.
Exactly. They provide for movement and they provide support. What else?
Protection,
They provide protection to what?
your vital organs,
Okay, yeah, they protect vital organs such as
heart, liver, kidney,
not
Brain.
necessarily the kidneys.
Love.
If you saw one of Canelo's fight, he kept hitting his opponent in the kidneys until finally the guy went ow and they called the fight.
Protects your brain.
lungs,
Yeah. Yep. All right. So what else do the musculoskeletal system do? Responsible for?
makes blood,
It makes blood. It also stores blood. What else?
Regulates your temperature.
No, that's the skin. So really, without the musculoskeletal system, we'd be blobs. A little bit of Jabba the Hutt and protozoa. Just little blobs of flesh. And so it gives us shape, structure, allows for movement, allows for protection, helps store blood. All right, store and create blood. So first off, the skeletal system. The components, what do you think? Let's start off at the head. What do we call that?
The skull.
The skull. Okay. And then as we go down from the skull, what do we get?
Mommy.
Thoracic,
No, that's the front part.
spinal,
There you go, the spinal column. All right. And then in the front,
Ribs.
the ribs.
No.
Well, yeah, you got the ribs and the sternum, the thorax. And then
Pelvis.
the pelvis, and then
extremities,
the extremities. Okay. Now, the skull and the spinal column, along with the ribs, is what we call the axial skeleton. And the way to remember axial is think about the axis. AXIS. What's the axis of the earth?
longitude, latitude,
Okay, part of it, but what else?
Is it on the y-axis?
Okay, what does that mean?
saying like the equator.
No. The earth spins on its axis.
Oh, yeah, the axis. It's like kind of like, yeah, you basically like hold it, like if you put your finger on top of your head and you just spin in a circle.
Exactly. And so the axis of the earth goes around it. So it's down the center, down the middle.
Yeah,
And so that's, again, the axial skeleton deals with the center of the body. That's why it's it's called the axial skeleton, the skull and the spinal column with the ribs. Okay. Now, the other skeleton that we have is what we call the appendicular skeleton. And the way that I like to think about it is think about the appendages. Okay, the appendages. So what would the appendages of the body be?
Extremities.
There you go. So the appendicular skeleton deals with the extremities, including the pelvis. Okay. All right. Chihuahua. So there's a skeletal system. You don't need to know every single bone, although that always helps. But you don't have to. You don't have to learn every single bone. The ones that you should, obviously, the skull ones, and we'll go over more specific skull bones when we get to that point. We have the clavicles, the humerus, the radius, and the ulna. So the humerus is the arm bone. The radius and the ulna are the two bones in the forearm. The spinal column, we'll talk about those later on. We have the pelvis, then the femur, which is the thigh bone. The patella, which is the kneecap. Then the tibia and the fibula, which are the two bones in the lower leg. And that's about it. So you don't need to know every single bone. Okay, that's a good thing. Good news. All right. So there's the skull. You see there's different bones. And again, you don't need to know all those bones. The ones that you should could be is the occipital bone, and some of them you already know. The occipital bone is a bone in the back of your head. Then you have the frontal bone, which is your frente, your forehead, frontal bone. What's this part right here?
Temple. Temporal.
Yeah, your temple, right? So what do you think that bone is called?
Temporal bone.
Yeah, the temporal bone. And then what's the jaw called besides the jaw?
Mandible.
The mandible. Okay. All right, next up. So there's the spinal column. I believe it's 33 bones make up the spinal column, kind of, sort of. 7, 12, 19, 24, and then like 10 more, 34, 33. The spinal column consists of the cervical spine, which means neck. There's 7 bones. There's the thoracic spine, which is your mid-back. There's 12 bones in the thoracic spine. There's the lumbar spine, which is your low back. And then you have your sacrum. If you look at the picture, it's that triangle looking thing. Right there. That's why I hate the mouse over here. And then the last one, and the sacrum has about 3 to 5 different bones fused into one. And then last, down over here, it's about the size of a postage stamp, if you remember what they look like, is your coccyx. Okay, your coccyx is the last bone. That's about 4 to 5 different segments fused into one. So. Next step. Oh, not blank. So there's your thorax. We talked about the bones. So give me some of the bones of the thorax.
Clavicle.
All right, the clavicle. What else?
Sternum.
All right, the sternum.
Ribs.
The ribs.
Scapula.
The scapula. Where's the scapula at?
In the back of it.
All right, in the back. What else? So all the chest stuff. Then you have the pelvis, your hip. The pelvis really is 3 different bones come together to form the pelvic, what we call the pelvic girdle. Okay. There's your lower extremities, your upper extremities. And then you have joints. And I don't mean the roaches that, you feel happy with and you get the munchies. I mean joints as in articulations. Okay. Shit. Let's see what you all made me do. I have a feeling that fluid or liquid and keyboards don't mix. Any truth to that?
Probably.
It's going to get loud for a moment. Hopefully that dried it up. Although I don't know what I pressed. All right. So as far as joints, we have the movable joints. So in the picture you see in your skull, you have those joints. The bones moved and finally fused together. That immovable joint is not going anywhere. The skull bones are not going to shift unless you get your head crunched. Then you have slightly movable joints like your back. You could twist, you got the muscles and everything, and there's when you're bending forward, they do move a little bit, but you're not going to be able to do a 360 just turning around with your back. What you can do a 360 with would be like your shoulder, your leg. That's a freely movable joint. Okay. So immovable, slightly movable, freely movable. And it's because of those joints that we already covered flexion and extension, and abduction and adduction, and pronation, supination. The only one we didn't do is circumduction, and that's going all the way around. Okay. You guys with me so far? You guys awake?
Yeah.
All right. So types of joints. So we know there's immovable and what else? I forget. I'm old.
And now we're going to write the number 3.
You guys are making me feel old here. Old and forgetful. There's fully movable. And what else?
What was the question? I didn't hear it cut off on my end.
What are the types of joints? We said freely movable and what else?
Slightly movable,
And
immovable.
immovable. All right. As far as movable joints, freely movable joints, there's several different types. The first one is ball and socket. So your hip joint, your shoulder joint, that's a ball and socket. We're able to move all around because of that ball and socket joint. Same thing with the pelvis. Just look at Elvis, how he can move that pelvis. I made it funny. All right, so that's the ball and socket. What do you think they do when they do a hip replacement?
Put a new ball and socket.
What was that?
Put a new socket and ball.
What do you mean a new socket and ball?
For a hip replacement, it's usually because the socket is cracked or whatnot, or the ball is cracked and they replace it.
But also not necessarily just cracked, but there's cartilage. Because bone, in order for it to freely move, there has to be lubrication, right? Just like in your engine, car engine, you need to put oil in there so the metal doesn't grind on another metal. So you have that lubrication there. Well, same thing here with joints. That's what the cartilage is all about. And that's why as you get older and cartilage starts to go away, joints get painful because of bone rubbing on bone. So because our hip joint is used a lot, as we mentioned earlier, running after that person that said, come hither, it's going to be very, very painful. So yeah, not only from a fractured hip, but also worn away cartilage. And so what they do, so here's the hip joint on the pelvis. And what they do is they go in there and they shave it off, and then they put in like a titanium something or another. Hold on a sec. And then on the ball part, again, they smooth it out, they drill a hole, and they put a new cover for that ball, and it has kind of a Teflon coating on it. They put it together, and now you have new gliding. So you don't have bone on bone anymore. You have metal on metal, but again, you have that Teflon coating to allow for that smooth motion. Okay. Um, all right. Gliding joint would be, which one is that? Oh, the clavicle to the shoulder. When you move your shoulder around and you feel your clavicle, you feel a little bit of motion. Okay. So that would be a gliding joint. And that's not something that we're going to really ask you. And again, all this is basic knowledge. That's not something you're going to be tested on National Registry, but it's just to kind of give you an idea of the joints. Hinge joint would be like your knee, your thigh, and your lower leg. Pivot, this motion right here in your neck. One of the cervical bones actually has a protrudence, bone that sticks straight up, and then the upper bone actually fits right over that, and that's how we're able to do this. You have this motion right here. Okay, I'd make it different, but it's a little perverse. All right. So earlier we talked about blood supply in the bones, right? So if we have a break, for example, it's a hot day. And so we want to eat some ice cream, right? Because we don't drink beer on hot days, right?
Sure.
All right, technically, we're not supposed to be drinking beer on a hot day. How's that? Better?
Yeah,
Sure.
All right. But we do, right?
definitely.
But you're eating ice cream, but you're eating a drumstick. And have you ever had that damn thing break at the bottom, or maybe it's already broken when you got it?
Yeah.
And so you break it, and because it's a hot day, it's going to be melting pretty quick, right? Have you had that drippage?
Yeah.
It's coming out of the bottom? Yep. Well, same thing with a broken bone. Because of that liquid that's red, blood, and a broken bone, what do you think is going to happen to that blood?
Gonna start pumping out.
Not necessarily pumping out, but it is going to start bleeding because it's really a storage area. It produces blood cells. So red blood cells. So it's going to leak. Is that a good thing to lose blood?
No.
No.
Nope. And so here you see how the blood vessels look. Advanced EMTs and paramedics could actually put needles into the bone and be able to give medicines and fluids through that needle. It's kind of cool. So it should interest you to do our next advanced class.
I was already planning on it.
All right. Now, as far as the muscles go, they're the ones that are allowing for movement. Because the way they do that is the muscles contract because of the nerve impulses. The brain is sending electrical signals down the pathway, down the freeway, until it gets to the off ramp, and it causes the muscular contractions. So all of this is my brain telling the muscles in my fingers to move, contractions. Okay, so going back to Brian earlier, boom, gun show, right? So my nerves or my brain through my nerves told the muscles in my right upper extremity to contract to make that angle shorter. Now to extend out, so I have my bicep that's contracting, but my tricep is relaxed. To extend it out now, what do you think is going to happen? My tricep now is going to contract and my bicep is going to relax. Okay, so it's those contractions and relaxations of the muscles that cause for movement or that allow for movement. Okay. All right. Now, when we talk about muscles, there's 3 types of muscles to think about. Obviously, the main one we think about is those muscles, right? Those muscles. But there's other muscles. But before we get to those other muscles, these muscles, we call those skeletal muscles. Are those skeletal muscles voluntary or involuntary?
Voluntary.
They're voluntary. Because when we sleep, are we flipping people off? Are we walking? Are we, well, usually not, but yeah, they're voluntary. Okay, so skeletal, excuse me, skeletal muscle is voluntary muscle. Now, with smooth muscle, you saw right now I took a gulp of my coffee. So am I having to think about sending that coffee down to my stomach? Anybody? Somebody?
No, you're not.
Yeah, I don't have to think about sending that. So, in other words, what kind of muscle are we talking about? I'm sorry. Is it voluntary or involuntary?
Involuntary.
It's involuntary. Yeah, we're not sitting there going, thinking about it, like pushing it down to our stomach. And then later on, once the stomach has processed it and whatever's going to go down into the bladder or going to be taking the kids to the pool, we don't have to think about moving all that stuff down into the storage area, right? So all of that is what we call smooth muscle. Because it's smooth, we don't even notice it. It just happens. Okay? So we got skeletal muscle, which is voluntary. We have smooth muscle, which is involuntary. And, okay, I am recording. And then lastly, we have cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle is unique. Number one, there's what we call intercalated disc. There's little discs, little things at the end of each cardiac muscle fiber. And what that does is, are you guys familiar with roller derby?
Yes.
Okay. Any of you participate in roller derby?
No.
I can see you doing it, Jessica. Beating some people up, some girls up. Look tough. I've had students and coworkers that did roller derby here in El Paso. They actually have a league. But anyway, so for those that are familiar with Jose, you're frozen. For those of you that are familiar with it, you know how they do the slingshot? They grab that skater and then they like forward and they go faster and get in front of the pack. Well, that's what those intercalated discs do. They take that impulse and they speed it along to the next fiber, and that fiber speeds it along. Because our heart is beating about 72 times a minute, give or take. And so it needs to speed up that process. But there's another unique feature about cardiac muscle. Anybody know what it is? Starts with an A. It was in your reading. So let me give you an example of that. Mortal Kombat. Oh, I just downloaded that game. I got to start playing it. In Mortal Kombat, where the guy goes into the dude's chest, pulls out the heart, right? And what's that heart doing?
Beating.
Still beating, right? Well, how the hell does it do that? Doesn't it need the brain in order to get nerve impulses to go or to do this?
Yeah.
So why is the heart, and I'm telling you, that really is true, but how does that happen?
The automaticity.
Close, but exactly. Automaticity.
Automaticity.
Automaticity is a unique feature about cardiac muscle. What does that mean?
It doesn't need the brain to act.
Exactly. Automaticity says that the heart is able to generate its own electrical impulse. In other words, the brain needs the heart, but the heart doesn't need the brain. And then you think about your love life in the past, right? Your heart was telling you, don't do it. He or she's bad for you, but your heart's like, oh, but I love them. They'll change. They're a good person. And your brain says, dummy, just wait. And then your heart's like, son of a, now I'm going through this heartache. Damn brain, right? I like to have fun. Can you tell I like to have fun?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell that I love what I do?
Yes.
Muscles, I'm not too worried about you guys knowing the muscles. There's really, I mean, the deltoid is the muscle right here. We talked about your bicep, tricep, and really that's about it. Okay. I'm not so worried about muscles. But actually there's one muscle I'm really concerned about. What muscle do you think that is?
Heart.
Your heart. The heart is a muscle. So there's a skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, smooth muscle. All right, so Mr. Dillon continues managing the patient's airway and ventilation. Brandon has directed another EMT, we'll say Jessica, to apply direct pressure. Oh, sorry, Jessica. To apply direct pressure to the groin wound. And as Brandon applies occlusive dressings to the chest wounds. One of the chest wounds is 2 centimeters inferior to the left clavicle. So where are we talking about?
Below.
Below what?
Your collarbone.
Collarbone.
Which one?
Your left.
All right, so about right here. About right there. All right. Next up. In the midclavicular line. It's right in the center. And the other is 4 centimeters inferior to the nipple in the mid-axillary line. Ouch. All right. So now, how can a stab wound to the chest impair ventilation and oxygenation?
The lungs are
It's
damaged.
going to affect the lung, right? It's going to puncture the lung. Well, what about also the pain of tearing through the muscle? I won't use Brian because he'll beat me up. So who else can I use? I won't use Jose because he's relaxing. And I won't hit a girl. Seth, can you hear me? Seth?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, cool. Nothing personal. I was just scrolling down and I just picked a male name. Because again, I don't hate girls. Unless I deserve it. Just kidding. So I'm gonna beat you up. Is that okay?
That's fine.
All right. So you said that my gun is ugly. And my guns are my babies. So I jab you right into the ribs, right?
Okay.
And so first off, I knock the wind out of you. But next, and I'm not talking about anger. How are you going to be feeling?
Pretty
You be in
bad.
pain? Was that
Pretty bad.
pretty bad? Okay. So your ribs hurt, your chest hurts, right? So take a breath. Are you going to be able to take a full breath?
No, just half of one.
Yeah, because if you try to take a full breath, what's going to happen?
You're gonna start wheezing and then
No, not necessarily wheezing. But are you going to be able to fully expand your chest? In other words, take a nice deep breath.
no.
No, because the pain's going to bother you, right?
Hmm.
So you're going to take shallow breaths.
Yeah.
And because they're shallow, are you going to be able to get a lot of air into your lungs?
No.
So your body, this is a sneak preview of later on, chapter 8, your body's going to be like, hey, I need some more oxygen. So what do you think your body's going to tell your respiratory systems to start doing?
To work harder.
To work harder, to work faster, right? So what's going to happen to your respiratory rate?
It's gonna go higher.
It's going to go up. So the patient's going to have rapid, shallow respirations. So that's how it's impairing ventilation and oxygenation, is that because of the pain, you're going to be getting less air and you're going to be breathing faster. So that might cause other issues. So you guys see that?
Yeah.
So now
Yeah.
I'm placing my hand over Seth's head and I say, heal thee. And now all of a sudden Seth has no more pain, right? Seth?
Yeah.
All right. See the miracle of. All right. Thank you for your participation, sir.
Of course.
All right. So now, as Jessica was mentioning about affecting the lung, do we have an opening into the chest?
Yeah.
If Jessica stabs her husband because he complained about her cooking, one, he has other issues, but is he going to have an opening of air into his lung
Yes.
that's abnormal? Yeah. And so what we'll find out later in trauma is we don't want air going inside the chest cavity because it could collapse that lung. That pressure is going to cause it to go. And we want it this way. Now, okay? So an occlusive dressing is what we put because it's there and now air is just going, not going, it's going. Okay? You like my sound effects? I'm trying to wake some people up. Carlos is like,
No, I'm here. It's just a rough night with the kids.
uh, hold on real quick. All right. So, do you guys want another break, or you guys want to get started with respiratory system? Let's take a break. I need a cigarette.
Can I get some coffee?
All right. 10 minutes.
All right.
I'll actually be back at 10:35.
Great.